Good afternoon, everybody. If we can make a start. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being videoed. Members of the public are entitled to record the proceedings and are requested to give prior notice so that any additional measures that may assist them can be put into place. Any member of the public who has any concerns should raise them now. Oh, thank you. So we'll move on to the agenda if we may. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. We've got apologies from Roger Evans. Item 2, disposal of pecuniary interest. Has anybody member got any interest to disclose? No, thank you. We now come on to public questions. Yeah, would you like to? Mrs. Callum, would you like to just come to the table if you like? If you press the 1 button, you'll get the microphone.
Is that working right?
Yes.
This is quite a long question. Please bear with me. Cabinet, I'm here to ask you a question which is central to the difficult circumstances in which you operate when cuts threaten our everyday fabric as a sort of internal enemy. The recently announced proposal to close Ludlow Library on Friday evenings and Saturday afternoons is regrettable.
You don't need to read all that because we've got copies.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
just a supplementary question.
my supplementary question is this. I'm asking if you will please rethink. Sorry, if I started. I'm asking you if you will perhaps rethink the library cuts, and to please operate all your powers of due regard in the knowledge that values count more than money. How else will our communities be viable in the present and in the future? And that matter of the future is absolutely central to everything that's going on at the moment. I'm chair of an infant school in Ludlow, and those children are understanding what's happening, and they're saying, where will we go when we're grown up? And that seems to me something that we need to remember in the midst of all these struggles over money.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Stuart, do you want to be on?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cannon, for your initial statement and also your supplementary. The supplementary, your question will be considered during the debate when item 10 is presented. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the scrutiny item, finance strategy task and finish group. I'm going to ask Claire to introduce this, but I'd just like to say I think it actually confirms a lot of what we're already doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to start off by thanking Steve Davenport, Gerald Dakin and Hannah Fraser, because they did come to the majority of the meetings. So thank you very much. So I'm just bear in mind the length of the agenda, I'm just going to make a few quick points, and then if anybody's got any questions I'll pick those up. But yes, the work of the Task and Finish Group has been carried out to run alongside the emerging Council's financial strategy, and all our work has been carried out on the Cabinet paper on the 18th of May, so some things have already been updated. These are challenging times, and it's important that we recognise the amount of work being carried out by our officers and councillors. Adult social care is our largest pressure. It is clear that preventable and early intervention play a key role in helping to reduce demand. It is important we continue to work with other public sector providers who will also benefit from this work. And I think the key message, which is going forward, is our economic strategy is going to be extremely important in helping us plug the funding gap. We recognise also that infrastructure projects going forward are vital. These link in obviously with planning, and as we speak, work has started on the next development plan from 2026. This is going to be key to setting the direction for future economic development, and that is where our future lies. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank the Task and Finish group. I think they've done obviously a lot of work on this, and it's been very useful. And as I say, I think we're actually doing a fair amount of what you recommend anyway. Thank you very much indeed, and for all the work that you and the group have done. Thank you. Sorry,
I just want to return to a question that I raised at the council last week that wasn't really answered, and that's to do with the sale of assets. And I see that that's writ large in the Task and Finish group. And it's a quote that I picked up from the Chronicle, not the Chronicle not so long ago. And it's about the golf course at Neil Brace. And there's a quote that he obviously, the chief executive was obviously asked about rumours, I think this emanated from yourself, Malcolm, about selling off the golf course. And it said, but Mr. Wright said there were no plans to sell Neil Brace golf course, which is believed to be worth in excess of £15 million. He told the Chronicle, the site may not always be a golf course, but will always be available as public amenity. That was in quote. There are no specific plans around the golf course, and all plans will be subject to planning approval. There would have to be a public amenity around there. It may not always be a golf course. That said, there are no plans to do anything with it. There have been quite a significant number of queries about this, as you can imagine. Would it be possible to make some definitive statement about whether the golf course is among a list of assets to be sold off, or whether it isn't?
I think we can be quite clear on this, Alan. Neither I nor the chief executive actually said that we're going to sell the golf course. The golf course is one of the assets that the council has. In accordance with what we do, we obviously have to consider all our assets, but there are no plans to sell off the golf course, and that's a formal statement.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, Alan, it always depends on the question you're asked and the context, and I was being clear that that land is amenity land, whether it's a golf course or not. At the moment, the only plans are for it to stay as a golf course. There's no plans to sell it, but it will always be amenity land within the planning framework that we've got. So it's a bit of a red herring, really.
Okay.
Well, could I just come back on that, Mark, if you don't mind? I mean, to say that there are no plans is a little bit meaningless. I think the people that use it and enjoy it, and people of Shrewsbury and Shropshire who see it as a major, as having great value, would welcome a more definitive statement than there are no plans, because clearly in the way in which the council is at the present time, plans, whether they're on the table or not, suddenly emerge, and no plans become plans. So is there any way in which you could give some assurance to those who are very concerned about the future of the golf course, about its future?
Well, I think other than making the statement we've actually made that we have no plans to sell the golf course, implicit in that statement is obviously that it's still going to be a golf course. I can't see that we can say any more really. We have no plans to sell the golf course, full stop. No, you can't, I don't think we can be clearer about that. Okay. Okay, we've got recommendations A to G from the Task and Finish group. Can we accept those recommendations, Cabinet? Everybody in favour?
Yes.
Anybody against? Right, that's carried. Thank you, Claire. So we're going to move on to the revenue monitoring report for the first quarter. This is the first quarter of the year. You'll notice from this that there is a potential overspend of 1.3 million when you take what's happened in the first quarter and extend that across to a full year. Of course, we have a long way to go. We've still got 3 quarters of the year to go, and that's been taken up with a reduction in the general balance at this stage. I think, given this is the first quarter and we've got a budget of in excess of 700 million, it's not a bad preliminary outturn to have. Has anybody got any questions to this paper? No. Well, I'll move the recommendations A and B. Is that agreed? All agreed? Anybody against? It's carried. Thank you. We now move on to the capital monitoring report for quarter one again. I see that we've only spent 9% of the capital programme, and we're 25% of the year, but I believe this is quite normal. My experience in the past that a lot of the capital expenditure gets spent in the last 2 quarters of the year, so there's nothing abnormal in that I'd really want to bring up to you. So, anybody want to speak to that paper? No? Okay. All in favour of the recommendations in 2?
Yes.
Anybody against? Right, that's carried. Thank you. We now come on to the Treasury Management update, and I would like to congratulate our team of officers on the way they're beating actually their own benchmarks. My experience some years ago, when we actually put out our cash flows and money that we hold to a private organisation to invest on our behalf, we actually stopped doing it quite a few years ago because our in-house team were doing a lot better than the external people. So I think they're to be congratulated on the way they handle our treasury management. Anybody want to speak to that? Okay, well, we've got recommendation 2.1 that we accept the position. All in favour? Is anybody against that? Oh, that's carried. Thank you. You're making it very easy for me today. Annual Treasury Report. This is a real technical document. It is as it is. It quite clearly lays out what we're doing in this area. Does anybody want to speak to that? Or can I move recommendation 2.1? All those in favour? Anybody against? Carried. We'll say to the public these documents tend to be very technical documents, and that's why they go through quite quickly. The Treasury Management Update Quarter 1. Does anybody want to speak that? It is as it is in the report. It's quite a comprehensive report. Does anybody want to speak that? Now can I move recommendation 2.1 then? All in favour? Anybody against? That's carried. Thank you. Now we come on to something that's probably a bit more contentious. This is the review of Shropshire's library opening hours. Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Leader. You have in front of you the papers which outline the review of the Shropshire Library opening hours. The report sets out the progress that the Shropshire Council has made in redesigning its library services and the consultations that we've gone through, which in actual fact has been supported by 1,355 responses, which is extremely good, which indicates the importance that the public attach to their library and to ongoing service provision. Obviously, due to the financial situation of Shropshire Council, we have had to make savings in various areas, and this is quite, I feel, mild savings that are not really affecting libraries to a great extent. We are keeping the libraries open, which is important, and I think the general response from the public to the consultations has enabled us to put into operation a scheme of hours for each individual library. Originally there was 68 hours reduction proposed, and through listening to the public consultation it's now been reduced down to 57. That's across 11 libraries. Again, very important to recognise that library services are very important, from my point of view, extremely important, and it's important that we do keep the libraries open. And I think that what we've come up with in the review of these opening hours is extremely sensible. So may I submit and move for approval recommendations 1 and 2. There are some typos in this report, and I'd just like to draw people's attention to those before we move to any discussion debate. Recommendation 1 is to reduce opening hours should not refer to Ellesmere, otherwise that is correct. On item 7, which is WEM, which is right at the bottom of the list of the libraries, close at 5 and on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That should read that, not Wednesdays. And in Appendix 2, Bridgnorth Library, the tables describing existing and proposed opening hours incorrectly refers to the library currently being open on a Sunday. It's not open on a Sunday. The total number of hours figure is correct. So I submit for approval and move the recommendations 1 and 2.
Thank you. Well, I'll second it. I think it's an important point to make that we do thank those town and parish councils and other voluntary groups that have been working in partnership with us to keep these community libraries open. They are important. I think at the end of the day we should have served our communities very well with the way we've made this approach. We're still working with other town and parish councils on library issues, and we're doing all we can to keep what we can of the library service open. But I think it's very positive news that we've been able to curtail a little bit the amount of hours we're going to have to close them. But all in all, I think that we're doing a good job to Shropshire community in keeping the libraries open. Does anybody want to speak to this paper now?
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm, because we had the discussion about Ludlow, can you just confirm the hours of Ludlow for proposed? Make sure I'm doing this correctly.
Yes, you want to confirm those? Well, it's a reduction of 6 hours. Yeah. Open 9:30 till 6 on Mondays instead of 9:30 till 5. Open 9:30 till 5 on Fridays instead of 9:30 till 7:30. Open 9:30 till 1 on Saturdays instead of 9 till 5, which is a reduction of 6 hours.
So the point is, Chair, very much open, not shut, just a slight reduction in hours is the point I'm making.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. Then to speak to the move recommendation 2.1 and 2.2 then, please. All those in favour? Anybody against? Right, it's carried, thank you. Now we come on to the proposals for closure of the Shawbury Library. Stuart, to you to introduce.
Yes, these iPads are fantastic, but I can be a bit slow. Right, yes. In front of you is a paper on the proposals for the closure of Shawbury Library and for alternative library service provision. This report seeks Cabinet approval in the absence of an alternative management proposal to close Shawbury Library from autumn 2016. In making this proposal, the Council has taken into account the relatively low level of usage at Shawbury Library and the relevant high transactional costs, the outcomes of 6-week public consultation, its worsening financial position determined by central government cuts, potentially resulting in services such as leisure libraries, etc., being closed. There was considerable public consultation on this. The last public consultation was at the actual library where actually 6 people attended. So the end of the day, nobody was prepared to take on the running of the library, and so unfortunately we've had to come to the decision that the library will have to close. So the recommendations there in front of you is that the Shawbury Library is closed as soon as practical, and that a new weekly mobile library service is introduced. So they will still be having a weekly library service. That discussions are undertaken with Shawbury Village Hall Committee with respect to the future use of the existing library space, and that in principle financial support is provided for potential investment in the reconfiguration of the existing space on an investor-save basis, should agreement be reached that the current lease arrangement can be terminated. And recommendation 3, to delegate authority to the Director of Place and Enterprise in consultation with the portfolio holder for culture and leisure to take any further consequential decisions relating to the closure of the library. I do so move.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded?
Yes.
Seconded. Simon?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to the portfolio holder.
I want to speak on this obviously as the local member for Shawbury Ward. There have been discussions on this particular issue for well over 12 months now, and if members remember, it actually culminated with a petition that was taken to full council of over 1,200 signatures for people in support of keeping the library open. However, unfortunately, even since then, since that petition was signed, the number of users in the library has continued to decline. I work closely with officers and with the Village Hall Committee and the Parish Council to see whether or not either of those would be prepared to take over the running of the library. Right at the very beginning of the discussions, they said they didn't want to do that, they couldn't afford to do that themselves. We have an issue as well in Shawbury, obviously, because of the population. A large majority of the population is RAF, or RAF Navy, Army, because of the helicopter training school at Shawbury. And of course, they actually have their own library service anyway on the camp. So a lot of the residents in Shawbury, the Ministry of Defence residents, obviously tend to go to that library. So it is unfortunate that the recommendation has come to this, but I am pleased and grateful to my colleague that we will actually be having at least a weekly mobile library actually in Shawbury. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, Cecilia.
I just thank you. I was just interested in the library on the base at RAF Shawbury, and I just wondered whether anybody had had any discussions with the personnel there to see whether civilians living in Shawbury might be able to use the base library as well.
No, unfortunately, because of security issues, particularly increasing security issues at the moment, there isn't the availability to actually, for members of the public, to actually have access onto the base.
Okay, does anybody else want to talk to it? In that case, can I put recommendations 1, 2 and 3 as shown in 2? All those in favour? Anybody against? Right, it's carried. Thank
Just
you.
note that I abstain.
Abstain, okay. We now move on to the West Midlands Rail and Department of Transport Collaboration Agreement. So yours again, Simon.
Thank you. The purpose of the report is to seek authorisation from Shropshire Council to cast its vote in favour of a special resolution that is necessary under Article 8.3 of the West Midlands Rail Limited Articles of Association to authorise the signing of a collaboration agreement. Obviously, we're currently board members of the West Midlands Rail Limited. There is a financial contribution that we make to that, but we have always got the clause that we can, if we disagree with what's going on, that we can actually step back and pull out from the board. The interesting thing is that to actually be at the table, we've got a direct influence on with the Department of Transport on the new franchise, and part of that will actually also include having an effect on fares that are charged, which we are currently working on with the franchisees. So really, what I will do is, if we've got any questions at all on this particular issue, I will ask Matt Johnson, who is on the officer group of West Midland Rail, who's very heavily involved with this franchise.
Okay, Cecilia.
I must say I'm pleased that we're involved in this, but I just wonder whether there is any scope within our influence of doing something about the absolute mess that is fare structures at the moment. I mean, really, fare structures have just become completely ludicrous. The other day I had to go to London, and I was astounded to find that it was much cheaper to go first class than it was to go in standard class. I mean, that's just completely bonkers. So I'm just wondering, if we're getting involved in this, is there any way that we can actually try and bring some influence to bear with the franchisees over some rationalisation of fare structures which make them comprehensible to normal people?
Thank you, Simon.
Certainly, on that point, we do actually have a working group. As I say, it's an officer-led working group on that particular issue of fares underway, and I'll ask Matt to actually comment on that point.
Yeah, thanks for that. The nature of the agreement with DfT is West Midlands Rail WMR to be the devolved local management body for the overall franchise post 2017. The last 18 months has seen us inputting into work which frames up the franchise, which includes fares, service quality, service standards, rolling stock, indeed investment in local stations, which would include Cosford and Shifnal within Shropshire. So yes, we have put together the PQQ and the tender documents with local knowledge and local influence. We're also in negotiations pre-award with any potential tenderer under a non-disclosure agreement, whereby we can discuss local issues with potential tenderers to gain the best benefit for Shropshire residents.
Okay. Everybody wants to speak extra to that now? Yeah. We'll move recommendations A and B. All in favour, please? Right, is anybody against? Right, it's carried, thank you. So we move on to the consultation document. It's yours again, Simon.
Thank you, Leedy. I'd like to present the Shropshire Council Bus Strategy 2016 to 2021. The purpose of this report is to update the Cabinet on the proposed bus strategy and service prioritisation process 2016-2021, and the proposal to undertake full public and stakeholder consultation prior to its adoption. The bus policy up to 2016 defined a minimum level of service that Shropshire Council sought to maintain to ensure that those people who are reliant upon public transport can continue to access essential services and amenities upon which they are reliant. The overall public transport network was then built upon this minimum level of service. Current revenue spend on the subsidised network is circa 1.8 million per annum. That was 2016-17. And there is potential requirement to reduce this in line with wider council budget plans by up to 75% over the next 4 years. There is a requirement to update the council's local bus strategy post-2016 with an approach that is fit for purpose within the current financial environment and which allows reactive, equitable and informed changes to the subsidised network on a less that's the word I want. Say it again.
Prescriptive.
Basis than earlier strategy approaches. It is proposed Shropshire Council, in meeting its statutory duty to consider gaps in the provision of public transport, will only consider providing future subsidised bus routes evaluated against fixed criteria and weightings in line with those listed in para 11 of the report. I'll stress that point as well. The statutory duty is to consider, not to actually provide, to consider the gaps in provision. Providing we have got a sound fixed criteria, we can satisfy that statutory duty. The subsidised network will no longer be an absolute to be maintained at a cost in excess of the available budgets. Rather, the spend will be fixed in line with budgets and the size of the network will become flexible as required. We do continue to work with operators and community bus providers to address these issues and are actually encouraging operators to make routes commercial by cross-subsidising routes. We're supporting Shropshire Community Transport Consortium to develop a more long-term substantial future, including contracts rather than SLAs, in the hope that they will be able to bid in future tenders, put them on a better financial standing. And at that point I wish to move the recommendation to approve the proposal to undertake full stakeholder and public consultation of the draft bus strategy and service prioritisation process.
Is that seconded? Second. Anybody want to speak to this? Madge? They're all working today, Madge, you'll be pleased to know.
Sorry?
They're all working today, I think. So.
Yes, but never mind, I've got a loud voice if I wanted to. Just to say how I welcome this bus strategy. We certainly have problems out in my patch, and I certainly welcome when I look at the paperwork page 6 at the bottom here, development of bus route evaluation and prioritisation. I'm having trouble now, Simon. And for me, the bus that we have at the moment, which links us with Kidderminster and Ludlow, both of which have railway stations, which Tibby Mortimer and Onley Hill we don't any longer, sadly. The current provider is absolutely appalling. And our way of trying to ameliorate this, and I have to say that the Commissioner of Transport seems to be not very helpful. So it is important for us that we prioritise links to other forms of transport, and that is railways for us, which Ludlow is extremely good, so is Kidderminster. Car parking, etc. is great. So for that, I welcome this. If I go down on the same page, 7, value for money, the problem with the current one, that is our only public transport that comes through Clibberry Mortimer, up through Hopton onto the Clear Hill and down into Ludlow, is held with Worcestershire County Council. So we haven't got the control of the contract, and this has proved to be an enormous difficulty because it's actually added on to a town route, which is what the bus company is far more interested in, running around the housing estates in the edge of Kidderminster, than they are with providing the actual long-distance route. So I have to say that I would be very grateful if extra attention is paid to that, and for us to try and find a solution to this, because this is the only public transport that Clibberry Mortimer has. If we go on to bus service selection criteria, if you take that into account, the fact that the contract is not in Shropshire's control, we have tried to find a solution around it. Our head of transport and I have been working together for a while now, but we haven't really been able to find a solution yet. The importance, as well as the contacts with railway stations, is the fact that our post-16s go into college in Kidderminster or Ludlow. And at the moment they are being abandoned willy-nilly. They don't get in on time, so they're told off by their college because they haven't made it in time, and sometimes the bus doesn't even turn up to bring them back home at night. It's not so bad in the summer, but I'll tell you in the winter it's not very good when you're standing on the side of the street waiting for some non-existent bus which may or may not turn up. When you come to community transport, I'm chairman of the management committee of Regional Community Buses and the voluntary car schemes, and certainly we would like to expand from the community bus aspect of it. But we have a certain licence, section 19, and I think if we wish to expand we would need to be looking at different licensing. So I would ask that there is some consideration into the procedures of actually doing that and employing drivers, because if we were to take up a route which is timed, we would need to employ a driver. We cannot rely on volunteers. It's just not feasible. We have a robust fleet. At the moment our maintenance system works, but I'm not quite sure, as I see other things happening, whether or not that's going to continue. But I do urge you that you take that into account, that us voluntary groups, that the procedures and the licensing and the legal side of it is smoothed, because that would be quite helpful to us. When it comes to the community car scheme, because my office in Bridgnorth also takes bookings for Bridgnorth community cars, I'm not really quite sure of the effect of hospital transport on the non-emergency patient transport side of it. I'm asked my organiser of the voluntary cars to monitor it for me for 2 or 3 months to see whether we are getting the ripple effects from people who used to be taken to hospital by ambulance car transport are now having to come to the voluntary cars, and whether or not we need to up our game in that way, Chairman. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madge. Cecilia, I'll take 2 and you can answer.
Thank you, Chairman. I do support what Madge has been saying, actually. I represent one of the less accessible parts of the county where buses are almost as rare as golden eagles. And actually, it would be great. We have the Corvedale Buzzard in the Corvedale. It is a great little bus, and it is truly demand responsive. but I think we would welcome anything which puts these community transport schemes on a more stable financial setting. So I'm delighted to hear that you're moving to contracts rather than SLAs. But also the issue of drivers is such a problem because at the moment we're relying almost entirely on volunteer drivers. So any support that could be found to enable a paid driver for these schemes, I think would be extremely welcome. And I think actually at the end of the day would save an awful lot of money too. Community car schemes, wearing my rural hat, I would love to see these extended if we possibly could. And Simon, if there's anything I can do within my own area to discuss with you how we could do this, I'd be really pleased to do that, because I think that it could be a very useful lifeline for people who simply have no method of transport, who can't get onto bus routes, who can't necessarily even access the buzzard. If we could assure that they could get to important appointments like hospital appointments and doctor's appointments, etc., etc., etc. So I support this paper. I think that it's extremely sensible and well done.
Thank you. Simon, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, if I can thank both Madge and Cecilia for those comments. Cross-border subsidised routes are always going to be a problem because obviously the other authorities have different procedures and rules, which we've experienced just recently with the 341, 342 when Telford unilaterally removed its subsidy. So that bus service has actually ceased. However, it has been replaced with a community transport to which we are providing additional funding to actually maintain that. With regards to community transport, we do pay all community transport groups a base grant, and we also pay them for every passenger taken. And the Community Transport Consortium, we do actually pay them a grant to actually provide a pay-for driver. We are working closely with the CTC in order to help them, assist them to sort of up their game so that they will become, as I say, on a more financially secure footing, rather than having SLAs, service level agreements that can change. They don't know, they haven't got a guaranteed income. By sort of moving towards contracts, fixed term contracts, they will have a guaranteed income stream, and they can then build their business case on those sort of things. So we are working closely with the community transport services. So as I say, I thank you for those comments.
Does anybody else want to speak to the paper? No, in that case, can I move recommendation to 1, reminding members that it is a consultation document. All those in favour? Is anybody against? Right, it's carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 14, connecting Shropshire Phase 2 procurement statute. Before I ask Steve to come to this report, I'd like to say our official position is we understand that if we're going to move forward in our economic strategy, that broadband throughout Shropshire is going to be very, very important indeed, and we're still abiding by the government's recommendations, and we were going to attempt to get 94% of Shropshire covered by fast broadband. We know it causes problems geographically in parts of Shropshire down the south, and we understand why, but I think in the paper that Steve is going to talk to now, we've got to make sure that who we procure can actually deal with these kind of difficult problems, not cherry pick, as has happened in the past, where our providers have picked those areas which are easy to do and not the ones where they're hard to do. I think in Shropshire we've got a lot of hard to do places, and we've got to make sure that in our procurement process that they understand that we want broadband across Shropshire and not just in specific places. Okay, Steve, do you want to speak to the paper?
Thank you, Leader. I move then. Just to summarise, as the leader's already suggested, broadband has been a key priority for for the council for some time now and remain so going forward. The first two phases of Connecting Shropshire, first phase completes this winter, with phase 2 completing next winter. To date we've built 290 structures. There's 53 premises now connected, 47,000 of those with superfast broadband. Moving into the next phase, we have not spots or slow speed areas right across the county in small pockets, which to date have been too expensive to connect through the existing phases with fibre to the premise or fibre to the cabinet. Recently, I think it was the last cabinet, we talked about the open market review. That process is now completed, and I'm pleased to report that there was a good response. We have £11.7 million of funding to complete the process, and I'm confident that the responses that came back through that open market review will address a huge amount of those areas who are not connected at the moment, and those who shout loudly about how important it is. We hear you, and we are in that process of going to that next step. I think that there's approximately 16,000 premises still to connect, and those are going to be our priorities moving forward. Rather than set the bar at the same height, which was a minimum guarantee of 2 megabytes per second for all properties in Shropshire, we've raised the bar slightly higher, and we've said 15 megabytes is the new setting for this part of the procurement process. So with moving this paper, we're basically launching the ODU process with a view to getting tenders back by Christmas and hopefully awarding a contract sometime in January. So I move the recommendations as set out in the paper.
Thank you, Steve. Is that seconded?
Yeah.
Seconded. Does anybody want to speak to this?
Just briefly, Lee, it's, have you noticed it's working today? It's working today. And can I take the plaudits and all the pints of beer that just briefly to say, Lee, that the recent Ofcom report, it is to be hoped that this is going to be of assistance to all across the country, not just to us hard-pressed people in Shropshire. I'm just reading something here where, what would you believe, in Wokingham, the super broadband is not so prevalent either. So I'm just hoping that this recent report and the actions accruing there from will in actual fact assist us all. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak to this? In that case, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the recommendation 212223. Is that approved? All those in favour? Nobody against? No, good, it's carried. We come on to the final item, and this is in the hands of Robert Tyndall, Deputy Portfolio Holder, who's going to present it. Over to you, Robert.
Yes.
Yes, I'm delighted to bring to Cabinet for their approval of another community asset transfer. On this occasion it is the visitor centre of Bog Stipenstones. The papers are quite clear of the background. The major help to the Shropshire Council will be that the new lessee will undertake the repairs, of which there is quite a considerable amount to be done. The rent is below the market value on the basis that the organisation, and they have changed their constitution to make this quite clear, will reinvest the surplus that they make in the building and in the service they provide to the public in interpreting the history and ecology of the Stipenstones.
I move.
You move. Is that seconded?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody want to speak to the paper? In that case, I'll put recommendations 221 to 225. All those in favour? You show. Anybody against? That's carried. Thank you. That concludes the meeting. Can I remind Cabinet that we've now got a informal session in the